the opportunity to, I see what I did wrong, to really sort of show up. I think that's the beauty of what's happening today. I don't know what your feelings are about that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who've been quiet for a long time or have been working diligently for many years, but are now
Yeah.
finding the courage to
Yes.
step in and step up. And it's actually quite beautiful. See,
That just
see
gave
what's happening.
me, that literally gave me chills in a very good way. So, you are one of those people. I mean, not that you've been quiet for a long time. You've been active and working and healing for a number of years now, but you're certainly, I consider you to be one of these people who's bringing genuinely some light and love, and not some namby-pamby sense, some real, light and love and compassion and openness to the world, for which every time I connect with you, I mean, we don't connect all too often, but perhaps not often enough. I mean, there's geographic distance and all that. But whenever I do get to connect with you, I feel like, you're one of my people. You're really one of
Yes,
my people.
I feel that way about
It's
you
like
too.
vibrations.
Yeah,
I've known Renee all my life. That's what it
I
feels like.
know.
Isn't that amazing
I
when it happens?
It really is.
Yeah.
Like there's a kindred
Yeah.
connection, kindred spirit, however
Absolutely.
that is.
It's,
Yeah.
they say, I think, in these sort of mystical context traditions, very often that, people, I mean, I'm not going to do this full justice, but people, vibrate at certain wavelengths, and there are these kindred sort of souls that sort of recognize. It's almost like a recognition in pre-time, as it were, that we,
Yes.
in some sort of communal sense, or God knows what. And that's really reassuring for me whenever, I come across kindred souls. It's like, oh my God, I'm not alone in the world.
Yeah. And it feels easy. I
It's
think
really
that's the
easy.
other thing. It
Yeah.
just feels easy. And,
Yeah.
we've always, whenever we have conversations, it's just like
Yeah, it
the
just flows.
conversation could always continue for hours and we
Yeah,
just,
we need to do that sometime. Like do like a 4 hour long podcast.
maybe
Like
we might have
seriously,
to
like
have
Joe
some
Rogan
topics.
stuff. So we're incredibly blessed, genuinely, to have Renee Jayne join us today, and I'm going to ask Renee to kindly introduce herself while I share her website for people
Yeah.
to see.
There I am. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I'm a holistic nutritionist. I'm a somatic life coach. Those are the titles. I'm mostly a human, and I've been working with people in this kind of world, this very convoluted coaching world for over 12 years now. And I work with, the leaders, the executives, the entrepreneurs, the academics, the highly sensitive, or even the people who don't know that they're highly sensitive in that context, but that sometimes uh, secretly wonder, like, I know I have this warrior inside me or this rebel, and it's not come out. People who are really creative or old souls. And we work through self expression, through holistic healing, whole body, and recovery of a lot of things. Sometimes it's recovery of the self through trauma, sometimes it's nervous system work. So, in a nutshell, yeah.
Unmute myself there. I have to remember to unmute myself. Amazing. I mean, the nutshell is a big nutshell, right? It captures, and that's everything in a nutshell, right?
Yeah,
It's pretty much all of
exactly.
life, one's entire life's work, which is incredible. And we have today the title of our discussion is Healing Trauma. What was the subtitle? Could you remind me? Sorry, Renee.
Well, that's a great question. I wrote one so nice to you. Maybe I should look it up.
Well, no, here we go. Releasing
Okay, thank you.
trauma, healing the whole person.
Oh, that's
Healing
right.
the whole
Okay.
person.
There was
And
different iterations. I didn't
different, well,
remember.
I mean, you're writing, so that's beautiful. Healing. And can we start with trauma? What is trauma?
So, the first thing I want to say, Hassan, is what I feel allows me to speak on trauma is because I've done work and continuously do work through my own trauma. And that helps me as a practitioner to lead other people, as I call it, like self-leading, because we can lead ourselves. Sometimes we need somebody else. But I like to establish that because everyone has different life journeys. We all have different places that we are brought up in the world, different contexts of the family that we have been in, different experiences. And trauma is just like, it's an overused word. It's very broad, but I believe all humans have it. I mean, no one's immune to that.
Yeah, and I'm so
Yeah.
glad you mentioned your own sort of, you're alluding to your own background in this personal journey, because very often, right, I think some of the best healers, not just think, I fundamentally believe this, the best healers are amazing at what they do because they have taken the time to heal themselves, from whatever it is that they've had to heal from. And it's not just some theoretical thing. It's something very lived. It's very experiential. It's very real. It's not almost, I would argue, somatically felt, right? I mean, I know in your own work, I'm not dissimilar in that regard in my own sort of coaching work, that I try to have a very heart-based approach. It's like connecting, the brain is this incredible organ that we have, but we're so much more than that, right? And we are very much, this is how we connect. When I connect with you, I'm connecting with this incredibly beautiful human being, but not beautiful within, right? First and foremost, and there's this kind of inner sort of, that's not here, that's here. So
yeah. And well said. And I relate to that so much because the way I would describe myself is very analytical. I intellectualize. I love to be in philosophy. We have great conversations around this. And what I had found early on in my life, and unbeknownst to me, is how disconnected I was to my body. So it didn't come naturally to me to connect from my heart or to connect from my body. But what I realized is I hit a wall in terms of growth in relationships, growth with or evolution with my health, within my business, pretty much in every aspect of my life. It was really apparent to me that if I didn't open up this body and understand why I was so disconnected, that I was going to be stuck. And so that's really how it all began. And I think that's important because so many people are very disconnected from their body, but not aware of it. And I don't mean that in like a shameful way. It's just like we don't realize.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's right. It's a huge problem of modern living, right? We have been sort of cast as these fundamentally cerebral beings, and yet we're so much more, right? All the incredible sort of traditions of the world. One can take any one of the great living traditions, and they all describe very incredible detail, incredible nuance, incredible subtlety, etc., etc. The intimate nature of the mind and the body and the soul, and how they have this incredible interplay. I mean, I was speaking to you earlier before we went live about, my mother, my one and only mother, I kind of jokingly say sometimes, I only have 1 month. Oh, yes, that she was ill recently, and bless her, she's in her 70s now. She's recovering, thankfully, and I mean that whole thing really put me on this very sort of interesting trajectory in recent weeks, where I was like, oh my God, am I going to lose my mother? Literally, I was sobbing my eyes out, bawling my eyes out just 2 weekends ago. And the reason why I mention this is I've historically had, a very complicated relationship with the medical world, like modern medicine. And part of the complication stems from the fact that I've actually experienced injury, from, modern medicine as such. So I've, embarked on this journey over many, many years now, again, for the sake of my own self-healing, whereby I've sought to reconnect with my body, and it's like, my line is, I know my body better than anyone else, man. Now these, effing doctors, what, they meet me just like they met me half an hour ago, did some tests, and they know me better than I know myself. But this kind of attitude is, which I would argue was very much traditionally a given, right? We've lost sight of that.
Yeah. Yeah. We share this. I mean, a very similar story in the sense that I have come forward many times and lost clients, friends, family members have not spoken to me when I simply said that I have been injured by pharmaceuticals. And that in itself tells me something, you know, the cognitive dissonance to just hear that and be you're either on my team or you're not on my team. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for certain things, because there is. They can be so helpful. I mean, obviously we're speaking very broadly, but like at the same time, I got to be able to be in my truth and say I've been more injured by pharmaceuticals. And in a weird way, I'm somewhat grateful because it's led me back to my body. It made me angry enough to say, oh my God, I gave my power away to all of these people who I thought were the experts and that they knew better. And
And they don't.
ultimately,
In my
it
experience,
showed me how to reclaim my power.
Renee, this is something that's just not known enough. I any opportunity I get, I'll mention this. And I heard this mentioned by this incredible holistic psychiatrist, actually, whose name escapes me this moment, but board certified, etc., etc. Do you know the the third major cause of death, mortality in
Injury
humans?
by pharmaceuticals.
And you know,
Yeah.
right, iatrogenic. It's like from
Yeah.
medical intervention.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure that they always do know exactly what they're doing.
No, no. And the number one, I believe, is a recent thing. I just read opioids, I believe, is the number one cause of death now. I think it just surpassed what maybe it was heart disease. I mean, I'm not well versed in what the order of those causes of death are. But what I was actually looking into this a little bit in the last few days, that the definition of science has become really messed up because the very core essence of science is to question and to re-question and to form a hypothesis and then to question even more. And what seems to be the case now is, especially with some big pharmaceutical companies, is that not only are you not allowed to question, but it's set up where there's no liability. And so even if you have an issue, oh well, like there's nowhere to go. So what we do is we start to see this false sense of power. And to speak a little bit to the aspect of trauma in my life, I have worked through addictions. Recovery of various things. I've worked with a therapist, a coach, or a mentor in some way, shape, or form for over the last 20 years of my life. I continue to work on myself. And there is an addiction, I think, even to, I got to keep working on myself. Sometimes you just
That's
have to
interesting.
be
Maybe we can
present.
come back to that. That's an interesting one, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or
Um,
maybe it's one of the better addictions, hopefully, right?
perhaps. I mean,
Yeah.
I love evolution and growth is some of my biggest values. So I don't know that I would ever stop that. But in the same respect, I think it's important to just note that within the construct of these healing modalities, there's a lot of a false sense of power where we give our power away so easily to others. Like they must know the answer. This guru, they're going to help me, or this doctor or this therapist. And I'm not saying that we don't gain insight from all these incredible resources, but there's discernment where we need to kind of take a step back and check in with what is the inner knowing for my body. And it's pretty hard to do that right now, to be honest, in a culture that is inundating us constantly with everything, everything. And a lot of a lack of integrity in a lot of what is seen too. And so if we're not aware that most of what we're being fed is bought and paid for by big pharma or other things like that, then we're going to be really easily manipulated because we won't be able to see it. Yeah.
How do we begin to see these things? What are some of the initial steps, would you say?
From my learning, it starts with your physical body. So one of the things I like to say to my clients is it kind of a joke, but it's a joke because I used to do this. Everyone's trying to open up their third eye and be all like spiritual and whatever. But they're completely disconnected from their root, their physical body. And so it really starts with our physical body. And that's the only way we're going to be able to have discernment externally outside, is when we're grounded in our physical body. So, and how do we do that? Well, the physical body has cycles, so becoming more aware of what kind of cycles that we're in, becoming more aware of our emotional cycles, which is, I'd say if there was like a stacking order, it'd be like physical body, then emotional body, then our mental intellect, and then spiritual. And they really, we can move in and out of them, but without the grounding root of this human skin suit vessel that we have that houses our vast spirit, then we can't come back to our own sovereignty. We can't come back to who we are. And just simply asking ourselves the question, what do I need right now? I feel like, even I do this work, and I'm the first one to say, like, I'll take an Epsom bath to like relax. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should listen to a podcast while I do it. Maybe I need to listen to music. And I can see and feel my resistance to just being quiet.
Oh, interesting. I see.
Yeah.
Yes,
and so that's where it begins, is in those moments where we feel like we need something to stimulate us, or we need something, right? Can we let go of that attachment and be still, be quiet with ourselves? And for most of us, that's pretty uncomfortable. And I think that's important, to be in that discomfort.
Wow, I love all this. This is incredible. There's so much to unpack there. It's like being comfortable with the discomfort. I mean, we live in such times that there is absolutely, we can't just sit still, right? It's almost like we're constantly our attention is constantly being extracted. And I mean, it's called literally the attention economy, right? This is how they monetize things. And conversely, if we look at the traditional understanding of things, I mean, I use traditional just to kind of make something of a distinction. Life was truly about reconnecting with one's innermost self, right? One's innermost being, which is housed within this skin suit, as you put it. And what are some some techniques that you use for your clients as far as reconnecting with the body?
Yeah. What I want to say, just a little addendum to this, because speaking in trauma, every human being who experiences trauma is going to have a different starting point, right? So I'm going to share some things, but what I want to say is that for many years, I was told to meditate, and I would try to meditate, and I wasn't successful at meditating. And then it wasn't until 5 or 6 years after that, and so much shame, like, why can't I do this? And, everyone else is doing this thing. Why is it so hard for me? That I actually learned that somebody who's in a pretty acute state of trauma, meditation doesn't help them in that moment. I mean, it may down the line once they've worked through some things. So I like to say that.
Well, that's a very profound point. I mean, if I may.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, please.
That's a deeply profound point, in that, I mean, you start off by mentioning how people are told to meditate, and that's like very, almost like perhaps the immediate thing that people are told to do when dealing with life's issues. But very often, to your point, meditation will bring up all this stuff, which then we don't know what to do with. But I
Yeah.
mean, I practiced yoga for a number of years now, and while I was at Columbia doing my PhD, I'd attend these yoga classes. One time, um, at the end of the class, and we did some hip opening exercises, right? At the end of the class, I felt myself like I wanted to cry. I wanted to bawl my eyes out. I remember the teacher said, "That's normal, is it?" But
Sorry, there's
nothing.
loud noises.
Oh,
Okay.
so no, you're fine.
Okay.
But nothing beyond that. She didn't give me any tools or anything.
Okay.
That's normal. Okay. Like I mean, I was fine. I dealt with it. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the body, so it's so fascinating. I want to stay on track with your question, but I got to add this in. So, a funny thing happened where I live. My house has like the driveway's a bit of an incline, and we had a horrible snow, and my car wouldn't make it up the driveway, and the truck hadn't come yet, so it's just a situation. It's kind of funny, frankly. And so my new fiance is in the driver's seat, and I am behind the car with my son, and we're like pushing, trying to get the car. Now, the backstory and the reason I'm sharing this is to help us understand the body a little bit. So, because of a couple stressful things and combined with some food that I ate that was pretty abnormal that week, my digestive system was a complete disaster that week. It just was not awesome. Now, at the moment I'm pushing this car, my right thigh seizes up and is in massive pain. Now, in hindsight, somebody might say, well, gosh, that's just because you're pushing a car up a hill. You had something happen to your body. But what's fascinating is that part of the body, the thigh, is connected to a meridian that has everything to do with our liver and our gallbladder and our digestive system. And so because my digestive system was in a weaker state, that area of the body was more susceptible to trauma. And the same would be if we were to describe even the hips or the psoas muscle in the body. This is where we hold anger. So when you're in a yoga class and you're stretching and you open up your hips, it's actually going to open up any stores of anger that you have trapped in your body, which is frankly a good thing. Anger gets a bad rap as an emotion, but it's very transformative when transmuted in a healthy way. But yeah, so the body stores emotion. So what happens is, I was saying, like, we start with our physical body, and then that helps us move into more of the emotional realms, and understanding that emotion is not something that is negative unless we allow it to overflow and we don't tend to it. Then it rules our mind and we lose ourselves every single time. So emotion can be our superpower if we allow it to flow and move. So for somebody who's just getting started, it really comes down to moving your body simply. So it could be stretching, it could be walking, it could be sitting in a chair and just breathing. Maybe music is helpful, like that has no words usually because those trigger thoughts. But I would start there. I mean, the big piece for people, if you're already moving, somebody who's like, I work out every day, it's a big deal, but I got trauma. Then we go to like next level from there. It's moving in ways that are different than your body. I work with a woman who, she did that like CrossFit gym thing, which is nothing wrong with CrossFit, but it was kind of the only thing she did. And if I had asked her to slow down and to do some breathing and some yoga, she was like, no way, that is not my thing. And so we had to work through, what is your resistance to having some slow moments? And that's what really opened her up to understanding what she was suppressing from her
What
childhood.
was some of her resistance to that?
Well, I mean, it to me, it stemmed from a few things. One was that if she slowed down, like, so our nervous system is in a heightened state of fight or flight for a lot of us. And so sometimes we pick things. It could be a workout. It could be that we're workaholics, which, by the way, I've done all of these things myself too, right? It could be that we are just on a mentality, we're like on the go and we never ever stop and slow down. This is because our nervous system is in a space of like, this is how I operate and function because it feels healthy for me. But ultimately, if we slow down, it would feel really unhealthy. It would cause us to have to sit and look at what it is that we're running from. And what we might be running from is dominance from parents, abuse from parent childhood stuff. It could be our own need to have more power in life and where we're hiding. I mean, there's a deep sense of lack. I mean, there's so many things, right? But we need to be able to see, I guess we'll put it this way, we need to be willing to look at what it is that we're hiding from ourselves. And that work isn't necessarily easy.
It's
It's
very hard. It's probably
it's hard to
one of the
do.
hardest things to do. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the whole, speaking of meditation, right, as a means, supposed means for healing from trauma. I mean, I think it can be a very important part of it. But then we also have this notion of spiritual bypassing, right, where people will very often, and this is maybe I'd say it's one of the pitfalls of the spiritual life, or the religious life, however you word it, in that very often people will sort of hide behind certain spiritual whatever practices instead of getting to the core issues, right, which can be very painful, deep traumas. And I mean, what's the incredible line from Jung that I happened to, a few years ago, to a short sort of piece on that, but the line is, that which we need the most will be found where we least want to look.
Yeah.
Which is which says it all, right? Which is,
Yeah,
I mean, Jung was, I believe, his own, of course, but
totally. Yeah, I mean, it's like where we put our values, our investments in our character. And so we have to think about where our values are. And I sometimes, when I look at my values, I have to kind of dissect them and think, okay, what beliefs helped me form these values, and really check myself even on my belief systems, because those are all convoluted in this world. They came from maybe lifetimes before us. And when I looked at them, I got to see something that I found to be like pretty life changing for myself. And one of my beliefs is that I felt if I could stay, I want to put this in a way that actually makes sense to everyone else. So I got to think back to the steps. And it was almost like I felt like I wanted everything to work out all the time. I wanted it to just flow. I wanted it to be easy. And what I got from that is that ultimately I wanted to be in control. I wanted control. And my belief is that if I was in control and kept everything kind of safe and surface, then I would be more powerful. So I have found in my experience of those who are like, well, I'm doing everything. I'm meditating and I do yoga, like, and
I
like,
love the tonality there. It's like,
I drink my green
absolutely.
juice and, I do this and I eat everything. Like somebody comes to me and they're like, well, it's to me, I'm just sitting there present. And I'm, my job, I judge, I'm a human, but my job is not to judge. It's just to be curious. But what I see is, because I've lived it myself, by the way, also, is that they're holding out this shell. I want you to see all the things I do to stay in control. And what I want to do is I want to help peel that away so you can see where you're not in control. Because that's actually where our power lives, is when we can see where we're completely out of control.
I was just going to say that. That's beautiful. I mean, so beautiful. Again, so much to unpack there. I was just listening today to this incredible, I don't know if you've heard of Shunyamurti. He's this incredible yogi teacher.
I feel like I've heard him speak
He's
at
a
least a couple, not in
beautiful.
person, but yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm very blessed in that he's agreed to come on the podcast March 12th. But regardless,
Oh, that's
the point I
cool.
was going to make is that I was just listening to one of his very recent, it's like extract, I guess, from a longer discussion, and he's talking about the title of this particular thing is something like the Technopolis or something like that. I forget exactly, the technological apocalypse, something like that. And he's incredibly profound and thoughtful, intelligent, and he was saying how the nature of technologies, these sort of modern technologies, is such that they come from human minds, very often male human minds, who are very often very paranoid, and they want to control, right? And he's talking about the nature of the ego, which in his understanding from a kind of traditional yogic metaphysical point of view, it's, as it were, always 1 second behind the super consciousness, right? The super consciousness just is, right? And it's, because we're tapping into the divine consciousness in a real sense. But so the ego, which is ever so slightly behind what it seeks to do, is precisely that. It wants to control, right? It wants to micromanage. It wants to be, because it's the ego, and this is the illusion of the ego. But of course, this is in so many ways the source of all the problems in the world, not least of all the problems, so many of the problems that we're witnessing today. We have, these sort of superpowers and these super powerful organizations seeking to exert incredible control. And there's, anyway.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm going to be tuning into that podcast, because that's stuff that I'm looking into right now too. It's right now we're in the middle of an enormous shift of power, and we haven't really shifted yet. We're still in the looming sense of it. And the way that I see it and actually experience it and feel it in my body is that it doesn't shift until people realize their power as individuals. And I feel like I can speak on power because I have explored where I've been manipulative, where I've been an addict, where I have lied, where I have cheated, where I have, broken commitments, like where I've tried to dominate or seek validation or try to control, like all that icky stuff that nobody wants to talk about.
No one
When we
wants to
face
admit.
that,
Well,
no one wants to admit, like,
but if
this is part of human nature.
It's a huge part of human nature, sadly, and it's a tough one to get out of, right? Imagine a world, right? If we may, for a split second, wherein everything just flows, right? Where, call me an idealist, I am one, right? A romantic, etc., etc. But I really believe fundamentally that a different world is possible, where we are working in commensality in a real sense, not in some artificially created sense, that people read each other's, they could just read each other. This is what's necessary. Yeah. Let's do it. So, we have to serve here. We need to do this, instead of this constant kind of grating against the gears, which is how it strikes me, that the world runs today.
Oh, I'm with you. And I imagine that world. And I live in that world a lot, not all the time. I'd like to live in it more. But I think that's the thing, is that when you can explore these dark aspects of yourself and really embrace them as part of your humanity, then it allows the other bright, shiny parts that you want everyone to see to just naturally exist. And it's in a way where you don't have to prove it. Because the thing is, I'll be honest, like if I look back at videos that I've made in my business like 6 years ago, I cringe, because I can feel the inauthentic aspects of myself, right? And I did the best I could at the time. It's not like I was conscious of it.
I think maybe also being a little hard on yourself, but
perhaps, but I think anyone would see that as you grow and evolve, you can see it. But my point is that because I know that when I hear a leader of an organization or of a country for that matter, or I'm on an elevator speaking to someone I just met, this work has allowed me to be so present in my body that I can feel everything they're not saying. It's really clear to me. It's a unspoken language that's pretty obvious. Whereas somebody who's not doing that deeper, dark introspective work, they're not going to pick up on it. And so it's almost like if you want to be able to teach it, you got to do it. If you want to be able to live this new way, then we kind of need to look into it. It's like if we made it very simple, in two ways that I've thought of it for myself is, am I more committed to lack, or am I more committed to seeing abundance? Am I more committed to being addicted to a struggle in life and that kind of energy that it gives you a high when you're constantly in struggle mode? Or am I more committed to joy?
Interesting.
And the thing, oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask you to say a little bit more about that, the being addicted to the lack. That's fascinating. To the struggle.
Yeah.
How did you put it? Sorry.
Yeah, addicted to the struggle. I also said there's like an addiction to lack, which to me is parallel to that. I don't have enough, so I have to struggle. Now, these are not things that we consciously think about. I don't think, I work with executives that are running, billion-dollar company. Like, they're not walking around saying, I'm addicted to struggle. Like, but everything in their life points to it in the way that they function, in the way that they come home at the end of the day and they're not present with their family, and their spouse is mad at them because they seem somewhere else at the end of the day and not focused there, where they are addicted to signing up for the next thing, that's going to help them. And it's like seeking. And this is a belief system, but it's really fueled, if we think about the root of the belief system, from old trauma that hasn't been moved or cleared out of the body. So for many years, I did all that stuff. Like, I hired the coaches to help me with my beliefs and my limiting beliefs, to help me shift identity and to help me say the affirmations and you name it. I did it, and it worked for a little while, but I kept coming back to the same old stuff. And ultimately I realized there was trauma in my body where my nervous system was clenched and stuck at certain points where, 90% of adults in the United States have experienced a traumatic event at least once in their life. And people don't necessarily I don't know if I have trauma. Like, trauma could mean anything. It could mean that you never mourned your grandmother passing when you were 4. It could mean someone ripping on you on the school bus when you were a kid. It could be like a fire in your house. It could be a lot of things.
Can I suggest something like this? That so I've been thinking a lot lately, just given my own struggles in life historically, traumas, shall we say, traumas. I mean, there's so much to talk about here. Where to start? So there is a notion, and I remember reading this article, one of these kind of really dense academic articles. It was a number of years ago I read it, and the author of the article's name escapes me right now. He talks about the invention of, I'm just kind of problematizing a little bit, not that I'm denying that this thing exists, the invention of the notion of trauma, the historicity of it, the genealogy, et cetera, et cetera. And I mention this only because it comes to my mind right now, where I'm genuinely trying to figure out a lot of stuff in my own life. I'm a Western subject, and I'm part of the 1%. Let's be honest. It's like, live in the West and you have a certain income. It's not just those execs up there. So I'm also acutely aware of late of the incredible privileges I have as a Westerner, what have you. Not least because. And this is a problem I deal with. I genuinely want to sort of try and hash it out with you a little bit, at least start a conversation. I've been lately sort of thinking a lot about people in Bangladesh, especially the poor. Incredible poverty. If I may pull up some pictures, which, my team member sent me, member of my team sent me just yesterday, or was it the day before yesterday? He lives in Bangladesh. And just really, to put it mildly, heartbreaking pictures of poverty, child poverty, not least of all. And I don't know what to do with that. Like, do I focus on my own trauma? Like, and this is a genuine question. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to at all take away from anything that you say. It's I don't know what to do with this. And it really hurts a lot. He's being asked how much are the stickers, and he says like 50 tuckers, and my team member Tanvir, who's like, why are you crying? He says, I have issues with my eyes, and he goes on to ask this boy. He says, I'm fine, I don't have any issues, and they're street kids, right? So I don't know what to do with this, to be honest. Anyway, you get the picture. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
I'm really like, I'm dealing with my own shit. It's like my own privilege shit. I'm not saying that you're being privileged at all, or like.
Well, I have a lot of privilege. I get it.
No, I'm really not.
Yeah.
I'm really not.
Yeah.
And because I have incredible privileges, right? The fact that I can even complain about some of the shit that's happened in my life is a privilege. And I'm just like, okay, so what do I do with the fact that there's incredible untold suffering in the world happening as we speak? Like literally, I know I maybe I shouldn't go into too much detail because there's like political implications. So I don't want to talk too much detail. But
I understand.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to go on and on here.
What a good question. I mean, I would say, first of all, I'm super aware in my situation how privileged I am just to get up every day and live my life in the way that I get to live it. And I have learned that we can only give to the extent that we feel that wholeness or nourished is a word maybe associated with food, but if we don't feel internally nourished, then we're energetically giving from a place of emptiness. And so I don't want to say that it's like, oh, first heal yourself and then work with others. First of all, healing is a lifelong commitment. It's not like I'm healed, we're good, right? But what I believe to be true is that when you put forth the effort to look at whatever it is that is your own stuff, you will be guided when you're present with it to what the next step is. And so you'll be inspired to say, like, I want to help in this way. And I am a believer that it doesn't have to be like, for example, if somebody gives $250 million to children, or if somebody shows up and gives nothing, but they serve meals to some children, I don't think that one's better than the other. I think we all have an energetic ability to give love and open our hearts, and that it is our responsibility to do so in as many ways as possible. Like, for another example, like holding the door for somebody when you walk into a store, letting the car go in front of you, smiling at the stranger when you pass them on the street. Like, these things seem so simple, but they are literally part of a huge ripple effect. Yes, it doesn't immediately impact the children in Bangladesh. There's other things that need to be done and certainly can be done, but this is how it begins. And I think sometimes in my head, I'm like, gosh, I want to do something, but I just don't know what to do. So then I do nothing. And I want to just say we can always do something. We can smile at the person that needs a smile.
You summarized actually a beautiful prophetic tradition in the Islamic tradition where the Blessed Prophet, he laid it out like that, essentially, that about the nature of charity, that smiling in the face of someone is a form of charity, removing, something harmful from the path, the pathway is a form of charity, and that we should always be seeking to be charitable, to be loving, to be compassionate. So and it's beautiful that I really appreciate that. That actually generally gives me, like, okay, I can breathe a little bit better. But yeah,
it's really being, my goal is always to be of service. first and foremost. And it doesn't mean we don't have discernment, because sometimes we need to, because we can't save people. We can't save everyone. We'd like to, but if we're really grounded in our relationship with God, spirit, higher power, whatever we call that for ourselves, I really believe if we ask, we'll be shown how to be of service. And we don't know what ripple that will have. And I like to think that the power dynamic shifts to a place where people who want to be of pure heart and service have more money so they can really help the children that need it so desperately in our
Amen.
world.
Yeah, I really feel that's coming. I mean, it has to come. The time has to
Yeah.
be here now. If not now, then when, right? People who, and because, as well, if not better than me, that money in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's just it's a type of energy. And really the question is, what do we do with it, right? Do
Yeah.
we, I mean, Tony Robbins, whom I've had occasion to describe as my greatest teacher, I mean, I think he's a force of nature. He has said, I've heard him mention in the past, that money just magnifies whatever tendencies we already have within us. So if our tendency is to be miserly and mean, then we're going to be more miserly and more mean. Or if our tendency is to be more loving and compassionate and sharing and caring, then that's what's going to happen. So
yeah, and it's so well said, and it reminds me too that none of us we're not separate from each other. I mean, that sounds like a cliche thing that we've heard in songs over the years, but legit, we're not separate from humanity. Is like, we're all the waves in the ocean flowing back and forth together in combination with each other. We're moving in harmony. So when we work on our inner child and we support our inner child with compassion and we let our little self inside grieve, we are ultimately shifting the tide that's going to help all these children who are in so much trauma and pain and suffering all around the world. And then it allows us to have more of a space and compassion to perhaps go and help in other ways. I mean, we see so many people say, I'm going to go work over here with my organization. And yet, like that can help. That can help. But don't think for a second that working on yourself isn't helping too.
very
Because
important.
I believe that it makes, what is that called? The butterfly effect, the ripple effect.
Of course, of course. No, right. I mean, it's right, the sort of tension between, one could say, the activist spirit, right, and the kind of, for want of a better way of putting it, the meditator spirit, right? So the meditator archetype is like, I'm going to sit here and meditate, versus the activist is like, I'm going to go out and change the world. And maybe it's maybe it's a very important productive tension that we just have within us by virtue of being human beings, in that we kind of somehow need to marry the two. And right, the activist, the person who seeks to change the world through action, if he or she's not grounded in a deep meditative practice, then that can give rise to all sorts of other problems as well, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think that we all have so many archetypal places we can be in this world, and that we can't all be all of them. And that there's certain people who are Mother Teresa's, and then there's certain people who are the Gandhis of the world, and there's certain people who are on the front lines fighting for freedom, and others who are behind the screen speaking, and there's others who are raising money, and others who are helping children. And so if we start getting too caught up in like, what do I do out there? And we can't get in touch with ourselves to find out, well, what is my role? Because we all have a unique one. And it might be marrying these two aspects of our more meditative, godlike self with activism. But not everyone is that person. And so it's okay if you're not, but you have a role somewhere else that is just as important. I think that's important for everyone to remind themselves of. It's almost like, if you're not speaking up and sharing every day about this topic, that must mean that you don't care. But everyone has a different way.
And your sort of, how to put this, there's very sort of nuanced, holistic, encompassing perspective that you personally hold, which I'm always struck by whenever I've had an opportunity to have a conversation with you. I can't help but feel like, I really believe this, and I've said this. I think the last 2 podcasts ago, I actually said something similar, something along these lines, which is to say that the divine feminine, as well, in so many words, that comes through the feminine as such, I mean, not the feminine as such, but you see what I'm saying, is so important here, I think. The as a mother, I mean, you're a mother and you're very feminine, and you encapsulate, you embrace a perspective, a way of being, which is very palpable to me, that is so necessary today, more so than ever before, as far as we know historically, and the which is very much an embodied reality of commensality and compassion and caring, and not sort of separation, which is all too often the archetypally masculine attitude. So I wonder if you, I mean, in relation to healing and being and embodying, if you could speak a little bit to the role of the feminine in all of this,
Yeah.
in an archetypal sense.
Yeah. Put simply, to understand that the feminine is receiving the masculine. And the masculine has been, in my opinion anyway, culturally jaded. Like, we don't talk about the masculine in its true essence. We have people who say, let's smash the patriarchy. And when I hear that, which is basically like, for me, hearing them say, I haven't reconciled the internal masculine within me. And so I want to smash it outside because I haven't reconciled within
That
here.
is such, again, that, I mean, second time today, I just got the chills in a major way, where that's profound.
Yeah, and it's not a popular opinion, frankly.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Wait, are you
Yeah.
anti-feminist, Renee? I thought you were like a good person. What are you doing here? You're saying don't smash the patriarchy? What the hell is wrong with you? Go away.
I mean, so, nothing is like just one thing. The patriarchy has more than one perspective, more than one side, just like the feminine does. But the feminine is a very powerful way of receiving the masculine, so that way the masculine can lead, that the masculine can encompass this more warrior type spirit of action. It doesn't mean the feminine doesn't take action, but it feels to me, it's more of a devotion to a creative process. And I don't know, it's, to me, the feminine exploration is ongoing in my life. I'm forever experiencing it, but it's really about a sense of feeling more of my experience and breathing in my body. When I coach or work with a man and I say like anything about his body, some men who are in touch with their feminine, they'll be able to say, I feel this in my body. But a man who's devoid of his feminine in the moment, he'll say, I don't know what you're talking about. I feel nothing in my body. And so there's a powerful idea of that the feminine is for all of us. When we just to circle that back around to how we can really connect more deeply with our bodies.
Absolutely. I mean, that's also my understanding of things, very much so, that we are, each and every one of us, regardless of our sort of biological, whatever expression we have in that sense, gender-wise, we all have within us the masculine and the feminine, and our task, right, is to somehow marry the two, and to give expression to that which is, some men, excuse me, are more, sometimes they are very in touch with their feminine side. So it means, they may be of artistic temperament, like me. I've, historically been very artistic. So I mentioned this in the podcast, 2 podcasts ago, actually, that it took me a lot of work to actually reconnect or even rediscover for the first time my masculine core. And again, it's an ongoing process, and it's very liberating, as it were, to kind of own it, and to know that, I'm meant to lead. I'm meant to kind of, not to contradict myself now from what I was saying earlier, but I'm meant to make shit happen as well, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the archetypal sense, as you were saying, part of the role of the masculine, and the feminine side of my being sees pictures like the ones we saw earlier of the children, and it breaks my heart, and it's, I want to go out there and.
So I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to say this. So the feminine part of you is more of an inviting. So it's like when you see things that break your heart, there's an invitation, like, I would like to be a service here. Guide me how, God, like how do I, so we're inviting it to come. Whereas the masculine is, I got to go make shit happen. Beautiful. And so it's,
that's very beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And you did mention that earlier about the nature of the feminine. So, powerful stuff. Healing. So how do we, healing the body, right? Where do we, you said something, healing the whole person, right? What is the person? What are the aspects, the different facets making up the whole person, would you say?
Yeah. So, without sounding cliche, it's like we are what we eat. So that's very simplistic, but many people say that. And I believe that's true. But a lot of what's happening, like on a DNA level, dictates a lot of what we are also, right? And so when we say, like, I went to school to study nutrition, I was all about food. And I believe that to be true. And there's also this part of us that needs to understand that my DNA plays a role. Now, there's another piece that says, well, wait a minute, my parents had heart disease and my parents had this, so now I'm going to, which is also not true, because we know now through science that we can actually alter or affect our DNA with emotional intelligence and meditative practices and food. And then there's also another thread, which is about our mitochondria. This is the part of our body that is our battery, and it is what is providing the energy of our whole entire system. And then there's the nervous system. This is another thread. Now, when somebody's starting, they're like, oh gosh, what do I do with all of this? This is so much information. But I like to bring it down to very simple, like, let's get down to the root of the physical body. The gut health is where it kind of all stems from, because the mitochondria lives within the lining of your gut health. Your immune system resides within your gut health. Your serotonin, which is your happy hormone, 90% at least of it is in your gut health. If your gut feels off, you just don't feel grounded. You don't feel good. So there's just so many things that can happen when we start focusing there first. And we know that we have gut health issues if we have pretty much any other issues happening. If we have skin issues, it's just a reflection of what's happening internally. If we have autoimmune issues, comes back to the gut. We have thyroid, great book. Love that book. I have that on my shelf right over there. If we have, autoimmune stuff that we're not even certain we have, but there's symptoms of migraine headaches or sleep issues and issues with our teeth, like there's so pretty much a lot of medicine, at least where I live in the world, is like, okay, you have this issue, let's focus here. You have this issue, let's focus here. Whereas a holistic approach understands that everything's really going to pop up as symptoms of one, two, maybe three really big root causes, and it really stems from one root cause. And so much of what we eat has destroyed our mitochondria, has destroyed our gut health, or what we're not eating. So a lot of people are nutrient deficient. So that's where I would begin when we think about it. It's like, I want to work on trauma. Well, okay, good. Then let's make sure your gut's healthy. Let's make sure you're hydrated because you can't hold the capacity to work through any recovery program with any emotional or mental stuff if you're not grounded in your own physical system.
I mean, on that very question of gut health, I mean, gut health has been one of my obsessions for a number of years now. I struggled for many years with major anxiety and things like that. And it's not, it's one of, it's said that people with, let's say, mental health struggles, or however you want to put it, very often they're the canary in the coal mine, right? It's just, they're sort of exhibiting symptoms which are presenting themselves simply because there's stuff out there, and we tend to be very sensitive. People like myself, I'm very sensitive. You're very sensitive, so it maybe shows up on the radar more readily than for other people. Like for me, I can't use a mobile phone. It fries my brain. So regarding gut health, as well as I do, like bone broth is incredibly healing and lining. And I find days when I've kind of haven't consciously had some of that stuff, it can be like towards the end of the day, I'm like, whoa, I'm feeling really off. What's going on here? And now I remember, I didn't have any bone broth. It sounds so simplistic. It sounds too simple, right? People want something.
Yeah.
But sometimes it is as simple and powerful and beautiful as that, whereby it's like, I mean, I kind of language it within myself as along these lines, that it's a case of almost creating a protective layer of, it feels like I'm lining my brain. Like, I swear, it feels like I'm protecting it from all the crap out there. And I can like function, so I can get on with the rest of what it is that I need to get on with. And I mean, literally the book I pulled up earlier, right? It talks about exactly these things, that the mind gut connection is, inextricable, undeniable. Right?
Yeah. I mean, our body is always telling us something. It's speaking to us regularly. And most of the time, we get used to a certain thing. And so it just becomes the norm. And we forget that it's actually the body trying to, hey, pay attention, like feeling a lull in our energy at the end of the day. Sometimes that's normal if you've worked out hardcore and you did a lot of stuff that could have allowed that. But if it just is because, and then you're gulping coffee to like get yourself going, that's a red flag. It's a red flag. So we need to kind of be like, I like to say, understand the imbalance of our addictions. And sometimes when I say the word addictions, people don't like that because they're like, I'm not, but I come from a place where I believe everyone has addictions, like some worse than others. It's a sliding scale, but most people are all addicted to their cell phones. I know that I am. Like, as much as I can be good at it, I also can be really addicted to it.
But I was just going to say, it's a tough one. I'm addicted to my laptops. So it's a blessing in disguise that I'm so sensitive to my cell phone, so that I'm not on it, thankfully. But I mean, the moment I try to I have these intermittent social media fasts. So I'll start the day going online, not before the afternoon, typically. So I've had at least the morning to kind of disengage. But I'm deeply addicted to it. Like, this stuff is addictive as hell, and it's literally designed to be as such, right? So it's a tough one.
Yeah. So the ways in which we notice our addictive behaviors with certain things, they can really route us back to where we need to look, So if like a simple example for me is that early on, I lived with really bad migraine headaches. None of the doctors could figure that out. They would give me prescriptions that never worked. And I did the chiropractic, I did the acupuncture, I did all these things. Migraines weren't going away. And so I started taking a migraine over the counter medication that really destroyed my gut health, frankly, like really not good. And looking back, I would say I was almost, instead of continuing my search to figure it out, some might say, well, you were helping yourself along, and I was. But it got to the point where I would just feel a sense of one coming on. And instead of doing other things like sweating or working out or eating differently or drinking more water, I would just preventatively take this medication. And it became my like saving grace. And it destroyed my gut all at the same time. So yeah, migraines in the gut. So it's a long-term strategy but it's one that pays us for the rest of our life.
Really, I mean, the
Yeah.
gut is everything. I mean, was it Hippocrates, the ancient father of medicine, who said that all diseases begin in the gut. He literally said all disease. So it's the gut is everything, and you are what you eat, and so forth. I remember hearing this story number of years ago now, that apparently I forget where they're from. These people, these sort of emissaries, came to the Prophet Muhammad and his community and said, look, I think they were trying to be nice, these emissaries, and said, look, we want to offer you our physicians, right? That's what, it may have been like the Romans, I can't remember. And the story goes that we have no, I mean, the Blessed Prophet, he responded, we have no need for physicians because we care for our, like literally we take care of our gut. I'm not even joking. How cool is that? Right? It's
awesome.
It sounds too simple. Right? People don't hear this stuff. You say, it's like, what the hell are you talking about? No, it is that simple and that complicated at the same time.
Yeah.
Because, not least because modern living is so destructive, right? And dismantling of the healthy gut flora and so forth, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't often want to put people in categories, right? Because I hate that when people put me into a box, right? But I just want to say there's a few categories of people that I see. It's people who just don't believe that they have the capacity to self-heal. They don't know it's possible, and they actually believe that it is hogwash, we'll say. And then there's people who are in the middle who might have explored or heard, but they don't have the level of confidence that it will work for them. And then there's people who are self-healers, and they know that as long as they take care of their gut, if they need medicine, it's because they got in a car accident. But otherwise, or some catastrophic something, thank God it's there for those reasons. But otherwise, they believe in the body's innate ability. Yeah, also a great book, to heal itself. And it's really designed to do that. We just need to support it and help it along. Yeah.
Well, 100%, right? I mean, this is so contrary, right? The message that you just gave, which I think is this is what I believe in 100%, that the body is such a powerful, beautiful machine, living, breathing organism, right? Made up of trillions and trillions of cells and microbes. And we have like 80+% of our genes are not even, they're alien, right?
Yeah.
It's incomprehensible, right? So with these incredibly complex living organisms, right, living in commensality with all these foreign alien creatures, and if we take care of this kind of whole, like create a holistic, healthful environment for this body, it heals itself.
Yeah.
What a concept.
Yeah.
But that's literally what happens. Like when we cut ourselves, like if I cut myself, like the body heals itself. That's the miracle of the body. So
all those little blood cells rush in and
which is so contrary to this kind of medicalized, hyper-medicalized attitude. It's like, we're going to throw drugs at this, we're going to do this, that, and the other, we're going to cut stuff out, we're going to put stuff in. It's so it's barbaric. It's so
that's exactly what I was going to say. Barbaric. It feels that way. Right? Yeah, it feels violent, but it's in the disguise of a savior. And to me, that's the scariest part of all of it. And what probably needs to be talked about more, like publicly, is that the most detrimental thing to our gut, to losing our power there, is that stress response. Hold on, I feel like my earbuds just went out. So you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, good. All right. So
I was on mute, so I don't know. Maybe
okay, all right, good. As long as you can still hear me. Yeah, I mean, stress is what's hurting our gut more than food even. I mean, it's very detrimental. And it's not like we can take all stress and just say, oh, you're gone. Like that's part of life. But what we can do is we can learn how to mitigate it. We can learn how to work with our nervous system so we have a different kind of stress response than we have in the past. And this makes such a profound difference in how our gut operates. if somebody is in a heightened stress response because they're watching the news, they're exposed to the media, they're being fed fears and manipulations that you need to have this in order to be safe, then it's keeping them in the stress response. And then they're not being told to take vitamin D, or they're not being told to take magnesium or vitamin C or any of these things that are zinc, that are simple but effective. Yeah.
What do we do without going into too many explicit details, right? Because anyway, given the nature of things, what do we do in a world wherein there is this incessant messaging of a certain type, just around health in general, right? You don't have to pick up a specific, very obvious thing to pick up here. But if there's a single message for a mode of living, I'm sorry, that's not the human experience that I'm aware of has come down to us through the generations. There can't be one solution. What do we call one single solution for a problem? I mean, that strikes me as authoritarian. It strikes me as, I mean, what do we do with that?
Yeah, it feels like a cult to me. Like, I am your savior. I will fix you. And what it does, though, is it takes somebody who has been suffering and it simplifies them. It gives them the magic pill that this will make everything better. And I can understand when somebody feels that they need to have that. I can understand that that's not necessarily coming from their highly conscious self. It's coming from a stress response or a traumatic response. They don't know that, though. And so there's a lot of compassion that I have for individuals who are being bought and sold and mentally in that regard, because they're not able to see, for whatever reason, that they have a lot of options.
Well, I mean, this is the power, is it not? Is it not the power of messaging, the power of propaganda, news cycles? I don't know. I mean, not to dwell on this too much, not to go on and on about this, but it's kind of heartbreaking. That we have these. We're capable of so much more, right? In the past 2 years have been 2 years and a bit, however long it's been, have been very strange, to put it mildly, as far as right, the human experience and where things are going. And I don't know. It seems to me that this is a new chapter in the human story. I hope it opens up into something, more loving and compassionate and embracing. But one of my fears is that it maybe, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not blind to my fears around it too, because I'm with you on that. And what I'm present with today is that a lot of us need to hold the vision for the future, and we have to work diligently to keep it. I can't hear you.
Sorry, keep going. I'm being disturbed by people not supposed to.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, what I want to say is we need to hold be diligent about holding our vision for the future, because there's a lot of fear. I have it every day also, and I see the way that things are changing and moving, and there's some that gives me hope that change can happen, and then there's some that, I get lost in the rabbit hole too of seeing how things are unfolding. But I also know that when enough people come together and we hold this vision of a different kind of way of being in our body, a different kind of world where people are more open to have conversations and disagree with each other. And
well, my concentration is like totally whacked there. So here's a very kind of class, shows the class issue here. So the lady who, and this is terrible, but so the lady, bless her, she comes and cleans. She actually knows. I want some feedback on this. So I was like I'm in the midst of a very, as far as I'm concerned, a very important conversation, and she's like knocking. And she knows not to, anyway. So I'm like, don't come in. So it's, maybe this is part of the challenge, right? I'm not going to go on and on about this, but daily frustrations, negotiating simplistic frustrations with, anyway.
Yeah. So what's the question?
I
If
don't know
you
if
have,
there is a question. Like, what do I
yeah,
do? Yeah, because this is an ongoing self, anyway, I'm like, yeah, I've lost my focus here. But let's go back
yeah.
to,
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, I think that that's the nature of the world, frankly, right? Is that we're in the zone, we're having this conversation, and then something comes in, and we have choice, right? Ultimately, I mean, I've been where you have been, where I get diverted and distracted, and sometimes that's beautiful. It makes for the conversation, and then there's other times where we can look back and say, I could have just kept going and pretended like that didn't exist and held a different kind of boundary. There's always options. You can't change it now. It's choice ultimately, but
it's not one
it's
size
all
fits
right.
all. It's not one
Yeah,
size fits all.
it's
You're
all
not going to
leading us
dictate
to
to
the
me
same
one
thing.
solution here, are you?
Yeah, no. It's all leads us to the same spot ultimately, like we can't really mess some of this stuff up.
Oh
And,
wow.
yeah, we really can. I mean, we're gonna make it eventually to where we need to
That's
go.
profound. We ultimately can't mess this up. Can you say a little bit more about that, please, Renee?
Yeah, I mean, we could blow our life up. We
It's all
could mess
leading
up.
us to the same thing. Sorry, so sorry. Yeah.
It's okay. We could make a ton of mistakes. We could goof. We could like the our world as we know it could end, but we still can't mess it up. Now that comes from a bit of a privileged place, right? Like I'll just speak for myself. I know that if like everything went awry in my life, I wouldn't be on the streets technically. I'd have to live with my parents, which I would not want to do, but that's still a privilege that I would get to have, right? And if they wouldn't have me, I'm sure there's a friend or something, right? Like, so if I like trace back my fear of like, what if, everything went bad, I can still see that like I would have a landing place. For some people, they might not have that. They might legit be on the streets and they might say, how can you say that? How can you say everything is? But I have faith. I have a strong belief in God, higher power, highest power, whatever we want to say, that we're always on the track if we're following our integrity. And so if things don't go well, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It's just information. And that's not easy because our mind, our ego, it wants to say, this is bad. This is not looking good. Everything's going wrong. But ultimately, it's all happening for us so we can move to the next phase of our life or to learn some lesson that we needed to learn so we can likely help other people. Because the shit that we have to learn, it's ultimately so we can be a service, I believe, and share it with other people if we're willing to be vulnerable enough to share it. So yeah, we're all gonna get there, even if
Mm.
it's a different path. I mean, I don't know if any of us end up on the path that we expected anyway.
Mm.
It's really not in our control. None of this is in our control.
Right, right. And going back to one of your earlier points about doing the work on your own self, where you, let's say in a previous life, as it were, sought to be in control. You went from that sort of mode of being to recognizing, realizing that actually it's in our helplessness, in our ability to embrace uncertainty and to almost flow with the flow of time, that our power resides.
Yeah. And then noticing along the way when we are stuck or not moving forward to really see where we're still trying to cling for control, where we're trying to cling for more power because we fear losing it. So this isn't something like, okay, once I was trying to control everything and now I'm healed. Like, I don't see it that way. I see it as we have these realizations, we move through it, we grow, we evolve, and then we continuously start to see, mostly in relationship dynamics, where our little self or our old traumatic experiences can still come up and rear their ugly heads.
Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about some of your experiences with I mean, as much as you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just be honest right now. Like one that I'm recognizing is, so I was recently engaged to be married. Amazing, lovely man. Like I'm so thrilled. This is like the most dynamic, conscious, healthy partnership I've been in my life. He's my person. And at the same time, my history of trauma or attachment wounding is the thing I want the most. Just make sure I'm still mic'd here. You can hear me. The thing I want the most is intimacy, like depth, like
Well,
real
the
depth.
second you improved actually as you unplugged that. So yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Too
yeah.
bad I should have
No, no,
kept
it's
that.
good. No, it's good.
Um, and so, yeah, the thing I want the most in relationship is depth and intimacy. And yet, the thing I have historically feared the most in relationship is also depth and
Yes.
intimacy. So
Interesting.
it's fascinating because the thing we want the most sometimes is the thing that we fear the most. And so, as we get it, and all of a sudden we're living this life of our dreams, right? And everything's going well, we start to notice ways where we might sabotage it or we might shut down and like I'm not running, right? I'm staying in it, and thankfully he holds space for that. We have great conversations around this topic, which I think is really helpful and healing. But I can see where like things kind of shifted in my business since I got engaged. Shifted in a sense of the voice and expression in which I was talking, the strategies that I was using weren't necessarily working anymore. I started putting myself out there about controversial topics even more. And so some of my clients were like, this isn't for me which is fine. Like
Wow.
but I've noticed
That's
it.
great. I love that.
Yeah, it's tested every part of me of showing up for this intimacy that I want and yet also fearing it. I say my little girl self fears it. The adult me that's talking to you now, I want that. I love talking with you. It feels beautiful to have these kinds of conversations. It's clearly what I want. But there is this other part that shuts down or holds back.
Is there a fear? I mean, I don't by any means want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just speaking from my own personal sort of intimate relationships. I know, and I'm a guy, so maybe it's slightly different for guys. I don't know. Um, there's a fear of maybe to put it in a very simplest way. Maybe there's a fear of missing out. Is that part of it? Maybe I mean, I don't know that seems to be part of it in my case. Like, what am I mean, we live in a world of so much opportunity for connection and sharing and so forth, and we live long lives nowadays, right? And it's like, I mean, I wonder what some of your if any of your fears tally with that. I don't know.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, so what happened for me is that I was in a relationship for, I think it was about maybe just under 5 years. And at the time, I thought it was a pretty healthy relationship. But ultimately, we ended up triggering each other's deepest trauma. And it didn't end. I mean, it ended cordially in a sense, but it ended very much like a, where he was traumatized, I was traumatized.
In what way
Um,
were you guys sort of triggering what kind of traumas were being triggered? And
well, mine was I can speak for my side. It triggered my abandonment, and I can't speak for him, but I would say it probably triggered his abandonment wound or his.
that's a big one.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it would. I just don't want to speak for him, but I would say it
That's a
would have
wound
to
I
be about the
struggle with a
same.
lot.
When
That's
something blows up like that, it's usually like you mirror each other and you are showing. It's actually beautiful now looking back because it's like we taught each other
wow.
where we needed to focus on do our work. And
Mm.
what that led me to do was to say, okay, I need to really focus on me because I'm not going to repeat this in another relationship. And I felt like I was giving my power away in a lot of ways that were unhealthy for me, or allowing people to
What
take
sort of
my
ways?
power.
In what sort of ways?
Um, so One was that I was seeking validation from other people outside of me too much. It was almost like the archetype of the damsel in distress, and I wasn't conscious of this at the time. I felt empowered, but at the same time, I would second guess myself in life and business and relationships, and I would seek him to ultimately save the day, give me the information, which is way different than
Yeah.
inviting him for his opinion,
Mm.
but still sourcing my own sense of sovereignty and confidence and leading myself. Big difference.
Yes.
I was like, what do I do?
Well,
And then,
someone who's
yeah.
very I mean, sorry, I keep interjecting, but I've seen. I mean, I very often will look at pictures and see. Sometimes one notices some, can note evolution in person's sort of life, and I can see that. What strikes me, at least, as something of an evolution in just facially, say the person you were a few years ago to. I mean, you're very strong. You're a very powerful human being today. Not that you weren't then, but I can almost see that what you just described, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It does make sense. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And, when I look back to my childhood, which thankfully with coaches and therapy and things that I was allowed to see this, but I felt very trapped in my childhood, and very stifled, and it was almost like I couldn't breathe. And so the more I sought the Savior, the more the Savior wanted to save. And then I would feel so trapped that I would run, I would get out of there, and so I would escape it. And it ultimately was a situation where I found myself in, where I decided I needed to practice being alone and dating myself. I chose celibacy, actually. I was like, you know what?
I think
I'm going to practice celibacy for a year, and then it turned into 2 years.
I remember, yeah.
Yes, we talked about it at the
I know about
time.
your essential history. I'm checking. Yeah, that's incredible. 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a conscious choice for me because along my journey, I had a lot of people who told me that I had a lot of sexual energy in my body and that it needed to become more boundaried because I would attract individuals who would take advantage. And that my throat chakra, they said, was very closed off. And that I learned that when I had an imbalance with my sacral energy, that it impacted my self-expression. And so I knew that the only way for me to really source my power at that time, I'm not saying celibacy is for everybody, but was for me to like bring it back into my body so I could feel my sexuality, but I wasn't acting on it. It was a really important lesson and for me to learn. There was a time when, this is not fun to admit, but like I was at a conference, and there was a person I was having a conversation with, a business conversation. We had a lot in common. And we got into this elevator that was jam-packed full of people, like to the point where it was like ringing and said like, people need to get off. And this person is kind of like a well-known person in the industry, written books and whatnot. So I was at the end of the elevator. I got off the elevator and got on the other one, and I was just by myself, and he ran off the elevator and got in this one with me. And I looked at him. I mean, I just had one conversation with him, and he came over and he tried to kiss me.
Oh shit.
And so I just like pushed him back. I was like, what are you doing? Now later on though, I had a conversation with a friend, and she said to me, Renee, like that was not appropriate what he did. And we could go all these reasons. She goes, but I just have to tell you, I would never have allowed that energy in my world. She's like, you had something about you she's like, not to say it's your fault, but you have to take responsibility that you had an energy that invited that in without you necessarily realizing it. And I did. I had to take responsibility for that. And
isn't that a tough one? I mean,
it was really tough.
One. I mean, let's say, during the age, I mean, these days of post-Me Too, or we're in that post-mortem moment, but How does one, right? I mean, this I imagine would be a question, right, or some pushback. Some, you know, some people may be offering to what you just said, wherein they may accuse you of victim blaming, right? As someone myself who, I experienced certain types of sexual trauma. Like it's a tough one to deal with, right? I mean, I understand on a metaphysical level, absolutely what you said. How do we make sense of that in? I don't see what I'm saying. How do you respond to people who will be like, "Oh my God, Renee, did you just victim blame
Yeah.
yourself?" Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can see all the sides of that, by the way, because I've worked through them. So I'm not worried about what people would say. Perhaps like maybe the best thing to say, but I want to say, like, if somebody gets accosted in the street and they're abused by a perpetrator, I'm not saying that they attracted that energy per se. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm speaking for myself in this experience,
Yes.
looking at my whole trajectory of my life, of where I have been in fantasy, of my need for seeking validation from
Where
other
you've been
people,
in fantasy. Oh, interesting. Yes, yes, yes,
my
yes.
need for wanting to be liked. Like, this all gives out an energy. This is all an energy.
The whole issue around validation you said, right? To be,
Yeah.
I mean, so
Yeah.
forgive the questions if they're inappropriate or whatever, but I know you can correct me.
No, I shared it. I'm happy to
No,
talk about it. I
well,
think it's a big
uh,
topic.
it's a huge topic, right? And
Mhm.
what comes to mind for me right now is the mm, how as women, as sexual beings with incredible energy, right? Women have I don't think it's accidental that historically the different religions, not just Islamic traditions, different religions have tried to, as it were, contain, manage the feminine energy because it's very powerful. I mean, literally, I think if I'm remembering correctly, the Iliad, right? The initial kind of this epic poem, right? That starts off the sort of impetus for the story is Helen of Troy, who's kidnapped, right? So we have this whole epic poem coming out of this initial moment. So as all the greatest love poetry on and on comes from this kind of inspiration through the divine feminine or the feminine as such. Now, what am I trying to say? If the feminine is this incredibly powerful force in the world, what is the nature? What are the for want of a better way of putting it, what are the terms of engagement? Can we even discuss terms of engagement? Like, if we're living in liberal societies where sexuality is about free expression to a large degree, and we know how those things go. It's complex, right? To put it mildly. How do we negotiate some of these boundaries? Where do we draw the lines?
Yeah.
It's not clear.
It's not clear. And there's no,
Right or wrong.
I'm not like avoiding your question, but I don't believe that it's a one, we can't just say it's this, but what I can say from my experience at that particular time and other times in my life where I've had such experiences is I wasn't grounded in my feminine at the time. This was like, I don't know how many years ago that was, 8 or 9 years ago or something, but like I wasn't grounded in who I was. I didn't have the healthiest boundaries in other areas. And so because this wasn't, it's an energy that I was giving out. I believe that I attracted other people who were a match to that energy,
Interesting. Interesting.
right? And so it's hard conversation because was I really angry at that man for many years, and I felt assaulted by him, right? He did later come apologize, but like, I felt victimized in one sense, but I also realized, thankfully, through friendship and through work, that I also had to take responsibility for my part in the energy that I gave off and the people that I allowed into my space, the way in which I held boundaries moving forward from there. And boundaries are not meant to be rigid.
boundaries are constantly moving, so it's not just like, okay, the feminine does this and she holds this boundary. It's like it will evolve and move based on the situations that we're in, and we get to decide that. And the more grounded and connected I feel to my body, the more I would know. I think that if the version of me now was having the same conversation with that man, I would have picked up on what he was all about.
Of course, that makes sense.
Now, I
Yes.
didn't pick up on it then.
Mm.
So, because I just know. I mean, I've seen his public social media posts and stuff. I can feel it from here, but I couldn't back then. I was probably, starry-eyed almost.
Would you say a part of it can also be the sort of I mean, I obviously don't know who this person is, and you don't have to share that, but share that piece of information. But does sometimes the celebrity culture around some of these people confuse us as well, right? That can be confusing, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, it doesn't feel so much for me now because I feel, at least in the last few years, I've had like a complete like awakening to celebrity culture, it just being like bought and paid for by the establishment. So like a lot of the people that I used to
being bought about, right,
like so I tend to see the humanity more in people, I think, than I did in the past. And that's a good conversation to where do we have people on pedestals? Because having someone up on a pedestal, even unconsciously, like, we can like someone and admire their work and respect their work and perhaps want to collaborate with them. But I forget how that saying goes, but when you have somebody up on a pedestal, it's going to be a hard fall for both of you when they get knocked down.
Right. And what's the other sort of somewhat related saying that never meet your heroes, something like that?
Oh, that's it. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're bound to let us down, right?
Yeah. And I believe that part of my purpose here, or mission in this lifetime, is to share a bit more vulnerably about some of the experiences that I've had. So I appreciate you asking good questions, because I figure I had them so I could pay it forward. And I thank the people who helped me along the way, because there's people who allowed me to see aspects of myself that weren't necessarily lovely to to look at.
Well, I know Tony Robbins mentions how famously that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. It sounds like such a pat statement. I really believe that. And he also, the documentary I'm Not Your Guru on Netflix, I happened to be at that very day.
Oh, you were?
I'm not in the documentary itself, but
I walked on fire at one of his things.
Oh, isn't that fun? It's at UPW, right? Oh yeah, I've done that as well. Oh, it's so much fun and so interesting. But,
yeah.
In that particular Date with Destiny, with one of the members of the audience, he talks about, and she's a young woman, 19, I think, if I remember correctly. He advises her to thank her father for all the ways in which he made her who she is, this sort of incredible, fiery, powerful young woman, despite his, or maybe because of his very troubled life with drugs and things like that. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is being grateful also for these learning, these teaching moments, right? That everything ultimately, to some of your earlier points, everything ultimately works out.
Yeah. There's a young woman who I mentor who she was abused by her father as a child. And, so I want to say this because she's in the midst of working through trauma. Now, if somebody said to her to see the lessons from him and appreciate him, she'd be there's no way she could even do that at this point. Even being able to see her side of what she could learn from the experience is not possible for her right now. She's still like, so there's stages of working through our trauma, and it's really based on the experiences we had, our own, whether we're highly sensitive, perhaps, there's so many factors to it. And so I think that's just important to note that not one size experience fits all, but that we do not have to push ourselves to do a certain thing if we don't feel ready. That I believe we'll know when we know when to take the next step, or if we have somebody in our corner who we can really trust, that helps us. Because if we can relearn to trust somebody who's in a place of authority that's helping us, then it helps us even more so with the trauma healing process. So yeah, I identify.
I think that's a very, very important. I think that's a very important addendum to all this. But Renee, we can go on and on for hours. But I mean, this is the beauty of talking with spirited people. Honestly, it's just. I mean, I want to be respectful of your time. I also at the same time don't want to be respectful of your time, because it's amazing talking to you.
It's so amazing talking to you too, Hassan. Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, no, it's really my honor, my pleasure. We will have to have you on again very soon. And we can discuss details and, outside of this conversation, but I'd love to, within the sort of, within your sort of timetable, if it's possible, we'll have more conversations like this.
Certainly.
They're very needed. I mean, I'm under no illusion whatsoever about the absolute necessity of these types of conversations happening, coming from people, between people like ourselves who happen to know what they're talking about. I'd like to say that I know what I'm talking about, and someone like yourself who's a very true healer. Because
the collaboration just feels aligned, when you can
very
talk with
aligned,
people.
very natural, and I live and breathe this stuff, and just as you do, I really live and breathe this stuff, and it's the most, no exaggeration, it's the most rewarding work one can do. I love the hardcore academic stuff as well, but again, it's like getting stuck a little bit too much in here, where I'm really about this. It's like, how can we share like this and help here.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining in and tuning in today, and thank you again so much, Renee, Jayne, and we shall have further conversations, God willing, and weather permitting.
Yes. Appreciate you and your community. Thank you.
I really appreciate it.